Hey, hey, this is the Kampbel Catastrophe. I'm Campbell James, and we are going to be talking about ADHD. Okay, so before we dive in, I'm just going to say that I am not an expert on this topic, whereas I do have some hands-on experience, to put it one way. I am getting all of the information you're going to be hearing from the CDC. And I'm basically just going to be reading it and then breaking it down a little bit for you, so let's get started. So what is ADHD? ADHD is one of the most common neurodevelopmental disorders. It is usually first diagnosed in childhood and often lasts into adulthood. Children with ADHD may have trouble paying attention, controlling impulsive behaviors, or could be overactive. All that this really means is that parts of their brain just develop slower than other people's, mainly the part that has to do with regulating attention. Now, I don't know all of the cortex things of the brain, but they are affected. It is not something that people with ADHD can control. It is an actual disorder. People with ADHD cannot help having it. They are born that way. It is not in their heads. So now that you know what ADHD is, let's get into the 3 different types of it. There is the predominantly inattentive presentation of ADHD, and that's when it's hard for the individual to organize or finish a task, to pay attention to details, or to follow instructions or conversations. The person is easily distracted or forgets details of daily routines. This version of ADHD is harder to recognize in other people just because they don't show the external aspects of ADHD, but it is still there, and it is still ADHD. Now, the ADHD variation that most people think of when someone says ADHD, and that is the predominantly hyperactive impulsive presentation. The person fidgets and talks a lot. It's hard for them to sit still for long, like eating a meal or doing homework. Smaller children may run, jump, or climb constantly. The individual feels restless and has trouble with impulsivity. Someone who is impulsive may interrupt others a lot, grab things from people, or speak at inappropriate times. It is hard for the person to wait their turn or to listen to directions. A person with impulsiveness may have more accidents and injuries than others. All that this really means is that they have what most people would call a squirrel brain. Like, I have to do this, now I have to do this, and this, and this, and this, and this too, and I should try doing it all at once. Or, hey, this looks fun, I should try it while I'm at it. They are just go, 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 nonstop, a lot. Not all the time, but definitely a lot. And this is a lot easier to recognize in other people, and it's also easier to recognize in yourself as well. If you fidget a lot, it could be anxiety, but also ADHD does have a part in that, so if you think it's just anxiety but have other symptoms, you should look into some ADHD research on your own. But predominantly hyperactive, impulsive is more common in guys than girls, whereas girls still do obviously have it. They seem to be more prone to the predominantly inattentive presentation. Now, most people have the combined presentation, and that's simply just the first 2 that I mentioned, but combined. where somebody can't really regulate their attention focus-wise, like paying attention to details, following instructions, and if they're easily distracted, and just forget small little details of things they could do every day. But along with that, they also fidget a lot, can't really sit still, and then just constantly have to be moving, really. So now that you know what the 3 types are, let's get into some signs and symptoms. Now, whereas it's normal for children to have trouble focusing and behaving at one time or another, children with ADHD don't just grow out of these behaviors. The symptoms continue, can be severe, and can cause difficulty at school, home, or with friends. Really, anywhere and everywhere. People with ADHD can daydream a lot, forget or lose things a lot, squirm or fidget, talk too much, make careless mistakes or take unnecessary risks, have a hard time resisting temptation, have trouble taking turns, and have difficulty getting along with others. Now, these are all the things that are more typical for children with ADHD. As they get older, they get better at some of the skills like taking turns and getting along with others. Now, not all of the signs and symptoms are present with everybody, and people do experience all of the signs and symptoms differently. Some people might experience some of these a lot, and they could very deeply affect them and cause a lot of problems. But with the other symptoms, they might not have it at all. For instance, a lot of the people that I know with ADHD, they daydream, forget or lose things, squirm, and fidget, but they don't, and they do talk a lot, but so do I, so it's fine. But when it comes to resisting temptation, getting along with others, and taking turns, they really don't have much issue with that. So really, it does just affect everybody differently. And whereas it does affect the predominantly inattentive and the predominantly hyperactive, impulsive people differently, they do share a lot of symptoms. And just because you suffer from something that primarily inattentive people suffer with, but not the rest of them, that doesn't mean that you have primarily inattentive. It just means you just suffer from that one thing. And you do have to have most of these symptoms that are predominantly in one to be diagnosed as that. Sometimes people exaggerate their symptoms, or sometimes not even symptoms, but just feelings, and they get misdiagnosed. So if you are looking into getting diagnosed, it is very important that you are completely honest. You do not want to get diagnosed with the wrong type of ADHD or get diagnosed with ADHD if you don't have it. And vice versa. If you kind of hide your feeling, like hide all of your symptoms and say that it really isn't as bad as it actually is, you don't want to miss the chance to get diagnosed, because getting help does help. And if you get put on whatever treatment is best for you, whether that is like medication or therapy of some sort, then it just makes living with ADHD a lot easier and does help. So if you are getting diagnosed, please be completely honest about your signs and symptoms. Now that we've discussed what ADHD is, what the types of ADHD are, and what the signs and symptoms are, it's time to get to the iffy part, which is what causes ADHD. Scientists are studying causes and risk factors in an effort to find better ways to manage and reduce the chances of a person having ADHD. Now that really sounds awesome. That'd be super helpful. Now, as of right now, the causes and risk factors of ADHD are unknown, but current research shows that genetics do play an important role. In addition to genetics, scientists are studying other possible causes and risk factors, including brain injury, alcohol and tobacco use during pregnancy, premature delivery, and low birth weight. Now, this does once again back up the fact that ADHD is an actual neurodevelopmental disorder and that it's not something people make up, and the fact that it can't be helped. Like, you cannot really prevent it from happening, and that it is something that is there at a young age. Now, research does not support the popularly held views that ADHD is caused by eating too much sugar, watching too much television, parenting, or social and environmental factors such as poverty or family chaos. Of course, many things, including these, might make symptoms worse, especially in certain people, but the evidence is not strong enough to conclude that they are the main causes of ADHD. These, however, are stressors which can possibly trigger panic or anxiety attacks, which I will get to in a later podcast. They are not causes of ADHD.
We are supposed to have an ad break, so here you go, Mrs. Ross. Are you feeling down and depressed? Do you feel that something is missing from your life? Then you need a potato. Potatoes are delicious, however you prepare them and can be prepared at any skill level. Go to your store and get some potatoes today. Some restrictions may apply. Do not eat a potato if you are already full or are somehow allergic. Potatoes should be available at any grocery store or wherever you buy food. They are not available at the following: Petco, PetSmart, Hobby Lobby, Shoe Carnival, or related stores. I can't make this lady talk fast, but you get the point. So go get a potato. Seriously, they're really good.
Okay, well, now that I really want some hash browns, I think it's time that we wrap this thing up. So, in conclusion, we just talked about what ADHD was, and that is a neurodevelopmental disorder. It means part of someone's brain develops slower than usual. It cannot be helped, and people are just born with it. We learn the different variations of ADHD, which is predominantly inattentive, predominantly hyperactive, and combined. We learned about the signs and symptoms, which do vary a lot, but mainly consist of daydreaming a lot, forgetting or losing things a lot, squirming or fidgeting, talking too much, making careless mistakes or taking unnecessary risks, having a hard time resisting temptation, having trouble taking turns, and having difficulty getting along with others. Most of these are what a child's signs and symptoms are, but a lot of them do carry over into adulthood. And finally, we briefly touched on some causes, which do remain unknown at the time, but we do know that someone's genes do play a large part. And now that's all we're going to talk about today, and I will see you next time.